Hey, it's Leo. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my January wrap-up for 2022. I read 9 books in January, 2 of which I've already talked about on my Queer Shoutout book review for January, so I'll link that for you to check out. I'll talk about the other 7 on this video, and I'm happy to say it was a really great reading month. Also, February is off to a great start. Today is the 6th of February, and I've already started off with a couple of the readathons that I'm doing. I'll link their information down below, but I'm doing 3 readathons. The Black Author Tuber readathon, hosted by Margaret Pernard, the Missy Elliott readathon, hosted by Shay with the Hobbies, and Blackathon, hosted by Bowties and Books, which I'm on Team Contemporary, Literary Fiction, and Nonfiction, hosted by Luxurious Blue. I'm also participating in 2 year-long readathons, one of which I've mentioned before. That is the Black Classics Book Club, hosted by Bree at Locked Booktition, and I'm going to be joining a new one in February. That is the Indigenous Reading Circle, which my friend Karen told me about, and so I'll link that down below as well. With each video, I lift up a different nonprofit that's doing good in the world. I do this to remind myself that there's a whole heck of a lot of people out there making the world a better place. I'll make a donation, and I encourage you to like, share, follow, donate as you are inspired. As I reflect on Black History Month here in the US, one of the things that breaks my heart is the disparity in healthcare, both provided healthcare and healthcare outcomes between the Black population and the white population. And that's rooted in a lot of things, including systemic barriers. It's a very big, complex issue, but I think we all can still do something. And I'm excited to lift up the California Black Women's Health Project. This is an organization that's committed to advocating for policies and practices that promote and improve physical, spiritual, mental, and emotional well-being of Black women and girls in California. Some of the things they do are train Black women to become health advocates through skill-based instruction in community organizing, planning, and engagement. From a Black perspective, they educate women about disease prevention, domestic intimate partner violence, nutrition, fitness, mental health, reproductive health, menopause, and other health issues. They advocate for policies that address the social determinants of health and aim to eliminate the disparity in Black women's health status. And they work collaboratively with community-based organizations to assist with workshops, programs, and data collection, sharing about Black women's health issues. Sounds like an amazing organization, so I'm going to make a donation, and I encourage you to check them out. Also, do you know of similar organizations that may exist in your countries or states? I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. Thanks. All right, let's get to the books that I read in January. The first 2, as I mentioned, are on my Queer Shoutout book review, which are 2 great books, A Light from Uncommon Stars by Rika Aoki and A Memory Called Empire by Arkady Martine. Definitely check out those books and check out that video if you'd like to hear more about my thoughts on them. The first book that I want to review from January in this video is Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. This book was recommended to me by several of you on BookTube, but also by my trapeze coach, so of course I picked it up right away. This is a book that has 4 different storylines over several different time periods. The first thread follows Anna, a 13-year-old orphan who lives within Constantinople in the 15th century, and who teaches herself how to read Greek and discovers this old library with these abandoned manuscripts. She then winds up connecting with another character in this timeline, Omer, who is a village boy conscripted into the army in order to attack Constantinople. Then we jump ahead. There's a whole storyline with Zeno, who learns Greek as a prisoner of war in the Korean War. There's a timeline in present-day Idaho that brings Zeno to cross paths with Seymour in a library. And then we have this interstellar ship where Constance and her family are flying away from Earth. What weaves these stories together is the manuscript of Cloud Cuckoo Land, which is this old ancient Greek play that was discovered and is narrated throughout. It's so hard to describe how this is all pulled together. Obviously, I don't want to give spoilers, but I definitely recommend it. It felt very current to what I'm feeling when I read the news each day. Some of it was hard to face the cruelty of humans to one another, but it isn't a book without hope. It does all come together beautifully, and again, without spoiling it, I recommend it, and I give it 4.5 stars. Okay, this next one maybe won't be so hard to describe. That is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. This is the story about Shakespeare's wife and 2 children, and losing one of those children and the grief that ensues. One of the things that's interesting about the story is that Shakespeare is never named, though we do know who it is. And we do get to know him and his wife and the children very well. The characters are drawn richly, and I appreciated that. One thing that I did find annoying was that there was just too much tease at the beginning. Like, okay, you know Hamnet's gonna die, but Hamnet starts, like, the book opens with Hamnet. Even in the synopsis, it says, Hamnet's sister is sick, he runs to go get help. And so throughout the whole first chunk, she's sick, but but Hamnet's gonna die. But we're still in the story and we're still seeing Hamnet. But don't worry, he's gonna die. But it just felt a little bit like, all right, quit teasing us that we know he's gonna die. I don't know how I would have done it differently, but I just got a little frustrated with that. I will say that Maggie O'Farrell definitely described and tapped into grief very well, and I did a little bit of crying, a lot of crying in reading this. I'm glad I read it, and it was a good story, and I give it a good 4 stars. Next, I read a nonfiction that is Take Off Your Pants, Outline Your Books for Faster, Better Writing by Libby Hawker. First of all, I have to say, great title. Telling people, I'm reading the book Take Off Your Pants. Then I have to explain to them that a pantser is someone who flies by the seat of their pants in writing, and that a plotter is someone who follows an outline, and that this author is encouraging us to become plotters and to develop good outlines for our stories. I found it pretty helpful. There's some things that I identified that were missing in my story, and it helped me kind of narrow in on some changes that I could make to improve my pacing and plot. So I'm going to keep referring to it. I think it'll be interesting to compare the first draft of my novel I wrote 2 years ago based off the Save the Cat beat sheets. And so this, I'd like to, maybe not rigidly so, but construct the outline based on these tips. And it'll be a interesting study to see how it goes, and hopefully I just get it finished. Both Save the Cat and Take Off Your Pants are short and handy reference books that I would recommend. The next book I read was part of the Terry Pratchett readathon that Read, Write, Create with Katya, Rosie Cockshut, Say Kevy, and Scott at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot are hosting. We read Equal Rights in January. This is the story of a young girl who is accidentally turned into a wizard because the dying wizard passing on his power thinks that she's the 8th son of an 8th son instead of the first daughter of the 8th son. The little girl grows up not knowing that she is a wizard, and in this culture, girls aren't supposed to be wizards. Only men are supposed to be wizards. Women are supposed to be witches. The local witch, Granny Weatherwax, then tries to train up this girl as a witch instead of a wizard, and it's just not panning out the way she'd expected it to. The book follows her childhood and then her journey to the Unseen University, where she's going to ask the wizards to train her up because Granny Weatherwax has realized that there's some powerful magic in her that they can't ignore. Unseen University is steeped in sexism and won't admit her as a wizard in training because she's a girl, and the story follows from there. I really enjoyed this story. I found it humorous. I enjoyed the characters, the ways that it played with what people expected to see, how gender shouldn't limit us. Also, there were just a lot of really funny bits, so I recommend it, and I gave it 4.5 stars. Next, I read The Keening by Margaret Pennard. This is the first book in the Remnants series. Just a disclaimer, I have met Margaret through YouTube. The Keening starts out in Scotland, following this family who are crofters and make their living off of selling kelp ash, living as tenants on the laird's land. The book is set in 1822, and when we first meet the family, we are hearing about their hopes and dreams after a period of war has ended. But the peace is not going well either, and the laird winds up evicting several families and causing some trauma in that regard. This family, the McLeans, must strike out and find their own way. I don't want to give any spoilers. We do follow then the family as they try to make their way and the new reality of losing their land and their livelihood. I really enjoyed getting to know each member of the family. I felt that they were all well drawn and distinct, and we could see their character traits and their hopes and desires and root for each of them. The pacing was also nice. It was leisurely enough for us to take moments to enjoy some of the Scottish culture of the time, learn about what was going on with the Industrial Revolution and some of the changes that were taking place in the country, but didn't get us too bogged down in that. And the stakes were high enough that we kept wanting to turn and the pages and see what happened. I also appreciated that it wasn't over the top with the suffering. I feel that there's some books where you read where the people got to town and the person that they thought was going to be nice to them ripped them off, and then they went to this other place and the person that they thought would be nice to them stole all their stuff, and then, you know, like, people are just despicable and everything is awful and nothing good ever happens, and I appreciated that this story wasn't told that way, that certainly there were things that were not good that happened to this family, They were people that they met that were not friendly, but there are also people that they met who were friendly and were authentic, and I felt that I could engage with the story and not brace myself about like how miserable it was all going to be. I don't know if that makes any sense. At the end of the book, I am left wanting to know what happens next with this family, and thankfully there are more books that follow their journey. So I will give The Keening 4.5 stars. The next book I read was for the Locked Bookticians Black Classics Book Club, and that is Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison. This was first published in 1952 and is a little hard to describe as well. It tells the story of our unnamed protagonist as he grows up in the South, attends college, and then winds up moving to Harlem. There's a lot of traumatic racism that he experiences along the way, and for much of the book I was just anxious for what was going to happen to him. But I found it incredibly insightful and powerful, and I definitely recommend that you read it. One of the things that this book really made me reflect on was white supremacy and the ways in which that acts to extract resources, to abuse, to use for its own entertainment, without recognizing the humanity of people of color, which makes me angry. And I'm grateful that I read this book. I recommend that you read it. I'm also very grateful to Bree at Locked Booktician for leading us in a discussion of it. I'll link that discussion down below. Again, I give this 5 stars, and I hope you check it out. The last book that I want to talk to you about is brought to you by a bite-sized book chat from Sean the Book Maniac. That is The Wanderers by Mutumi Entabeni. This was an incredible book. In this story, we have Ruru, who is a doctor, and her father had left South Africa after getting her mom pregnant. He was an ANC freedom fighter, but after apartheid ended in 1994, he didn't come back, and he stayed instead in Tanzania. In present day, she makes a pilgrimage to go and find where he lived in Tanzania. He meets the woman that he lived with, who presents her with a box of his letters that he wrote in reflections as he was approaching his own death several years earlier. The story is told with 3 threads. The first is that we have the second tense narration of Ruru's story in the present day as she goes to Tanzania, she goes to find her father's house and meets this woman and so forth. We then hear the father's voice as we get the letters that he had been writing. Ruru then also reflects with letters that she's rereading that she had written to her own mother, who had died when she was a teenager. So you have these 2 sets of letters and then the present day of Ruru's story. I'll definitely refer you to Sean the Book Maniac's interview with the author, and he will be having an upcoming Zoom chat with the author that then will be on his channel. And when that gets broadcast, or when that gets posted, I'll go ahead and come and retroactively link. I'm sure it's going to be really great. This book was so rich and layered. It dealt with things at a very personal level, as well as events that were happening on the national stage. So it talks about apartheid and the struggles of the anti-apartheid movement. It talks about the Rwandan genocide. It talks about the disparities in access to AIDS medications. It also delves into really deep topics about the nature of human cruelty, faith, forgiveness, mortality, our connections to one another through our story and our words. The characters are complex and beautiful. The letters both have some really deep ponderings, and they also, some of them are written from her perspective when she was a teenager, so they're filled with some of that teenage angst and musings as she's writing to her recently deceased mother. There's philosophical and religious reflections and a lot of talk about faith, although I think of the characters only the father's new partner is a person of faith. I was able to find this on ebook, and I really wish that I had a physical copy. I was highlighting through the ebook, but I wanted to see all of the places I've highlighted it on the paper form and really spend some time with it. Again, I found it interesting, rich, complex, layered, and some pretty powerful reflections on the nature of humanity and suffering and connection and So I give it 5 stars and I recommend it. I would love to know if you've read it. I want you folks to read it so that we can have a conversation about it, because I'd love to know your thoughts on this book. Well, that's everything. I hope you have a wonderful day. I enjoyed talking with you about these books. Some of them felt like they were a challenge for me to try to explain without giving spoilers, but some really great books that I recommend. How did your reading in January go? Any real keepers or books that you wanted to share? Are you doing any readathons or any projects for February? I'd love to hear about it. Please feel free to like, subscribe, and leave me a comment below. I'd love to continue the conversation. There's so much to talk about with all these books, and I just want to know your thoughts. Anyway, until next time, I hope you have a wonderful day and happy reading.